Hello, everybody, and welcome to Great Conversations. Today, I have I would say, two of the smartest people in WordPress. Definitely some of the most experienced people in WordPress here, and I feel honored that the two of them take the time and talk to me. We're gonna dive into a topic that's shaping how we build, how we manage, how we scale websites, and that's AI in the WordPress ecosystem. We are going to take a look at what is happening as of today, how agencies, customers are adapting or can adapt, and where this might be heading in the next few years. But before we actually get started, I want you, the two awesome people, Jake and James, actually, just a quick Jake, James, and Jacob, Triple J podcast as of today. Yeah, maybe introduce yourself. So, starting with James, maybe you can start telling people who you are, what you're working on in WordPress, and what your role might be in terms of AI in the WordPress ecosystem.
Sure. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. And it's also awesome to be alongside Jake and Jacob, 3Js. My role in the ecosystem right now is I'm the engineering director for AI at Automattic, leading the company and building multiple products for WordPress and also thinking about where the future of our industry could go from that lens. I'm also a co-lead of the core AI team with the WordPress project, thinking a lot more about the enablement of folks building in WordPress and the enablement of the core project in terms of what can happen in the future, both technically, the project itself, the direction of WordPress, the open web, things like that. Before that, I ran a startup called WP AI, very creative name, and it did AI for WordPress. We did a lot of research around code generation and agentic systems for WordPress. And that's kind of where I cut my teeth with the WordPress and AI specific implementations. I studied AI at university. I ran an agency in the past for WordPress as well. Also did another startup outside the industry. So I think that's the 30-second to 1 minute background about me, and I can dive deeper in the future.
Thank you very much. And Jake, maybe you can introduce yourself, tell the audience who you are, where you come from, what your background is. Yeah.
Sure. So I think I'm a professional services guy that's been, I'd say, dealing with multiple eras of great change and what digital means to consumers. I like to say, I've been working on the internet since there was internet to build. So that's gone through the mobile revolution. There was a time when we thought animation and Flash was a revolution, the responsive revolution. I think now still thrilled to be in this industry at a time we're probably going for our biggest step change in what it means to do digital and be on the internet in the last 25 years, which is, of course, AI and its implications for the next 5, 10, 15 years. I probably am best known to people in this WordPress ecosystem as a guy that started 10 Up, the agency, back in 2011, bootstrapped that agency to around roughly 300 people in 2023, at which point we merged in with a company called Fueled. That was, I would say, if what 10up was to WordPress, Fueled sort of to app development, some of like the app product and design space to really round out our skill set. I think a very fortuitously timed integration in many ways, because I think that sort of cross-functional capability, moving beyond single platforms to a larger sense of how you serve customers' digital needs, even if you still use many of those same platforms, like WordPress, is quite timely. Since taking on that role, I've probably worn a bunch of different hats in the last 2 years. I now just, I think for simplicity, so I don't have to keep changing titles every 6 months. Just with my partner, really work closely with our current CEO, the board of directors, and our platform executive team, taking on special projects, special interest areas in the company. For me, for the last roughly 6 months now, I guess, that's been two very closely related subjects at the moment. One of those subjects is, probably if you were to formally give it a function, it's really been like the storytelling, marketing, talking about what we're doing as a company, talking about publicly, helping write white papers with our team, writing blog posts, writing case studies about how we're serving the industry. I think, insofar as our agency's value proposition, it's the top of our new website at fuel.com, has a lot to do with how we use AI to still create very human experiences and drive human-centered design and do truly high caliber work. A lot of the storytelling, a lot of thinking, a lot of my collaboration with a larger engineering strategy and marketing team has to do with how we're using and applying AI. And I guess the other thing I should say, to at least have a shred of competing with my colleague in the industry here in terms of expertise in the space. It's I like to say I've been kind of into AI since before it was cool, back when we just called it machine learning. So we've been doing work in that space at 10 Up, work that I was very personally curious about and tended to be very involved in since I would say like roughly 2018 as a company, going back to the first version of our plugin Classify, which at that time used like IBM Watson to do language processing and tag recommendations and everything else, and have stayed very close to projects that we do in house around applications of AI and machine intelligence.
And Jake, an interesting overlap is that my agency used Classify back in the day, and I found it really interesting. And that might have been my first uh, use case with AI and WordPress. And I remember the alt text stuff through the Microsoft services, and I found that really interesting and kind of started piecing things together of, hey, like there's a lot that we could be doing here, even back then. So thanks for Classify. I appreciate it.
That's really inspiring to hear today. Thank you.
Yeah, wow, that's really inspiring. Yeah. Speaking of Classify, can you explain a little bit what you do with Classify, or where you come from? What was the base idea starting like back in 2018, and what it is today, maybe?
I mean, I think it's fair to say one of the like since day one guiding principles that defined 10 Up, that defined how we look at the world, is the idea that the process of creating content on the web, articles and stories, pages, marketing campaigns, whatever you do, publishing content on the web, is that we always wanted to, we used to say we like it to be easy, maybe even fun. The idea about like being able to tell a story, being able to publish something, be able to create, shouldn't feel like you need. I mean, this might sound silly today, but certainly back in 2011, should not feel like you need a computer science degree to do so. Should not require 5 hours of training and looking at the manual any more than like creating a Word document was.
Yeah.
Exercise or creating an InDesign layout or something would be back in 2011. So I think on that continuity, that's always been a real personal passion of mine. I think always been a guiding principle for 10 Up and now Fueled, is how do we make it very easy for our customers over time, make it easier and easier and easier. So it maybe even joyful to go on and be able to create content. And so I think when we started to see for customers, over and over again, like huge archives of content, tags are a mess, the categories are a mess, accessibility audits in 2016, 2017, over and over. Nobody remembers the alt text, or it generates based off like the god awful file name of the image that you uploaded, and all that kind of stuff. So when we see those patterns coming up of like, this is a pain point, how can we make this easier? How can we make this more seamless? We're always on the lookout for solutions, for creative efficiencies to innovate our way out of those problems. So I think it was that spirit very specifically for Classify. The first feature being that like IBM Watson driven NLP auto categories and tags came from a project by the customer. It was the Saturday Evening Press. Um, it's been a publisher for decades that had huge archives and had this problem of like, how do we intelligently, if having to go manually or make some stupid like logic decisions, clean up and recategorize all of this. And we're just doing a little bit of research at that time. It sounds goofy today to think of them as player. At that time, IBM is actually doing really interesting work with Watson and again, machine learning. And so I think that was the initial impetus. And we kept looking at, okay, what else does that platform do? James mentioned it. What is like the Azure Vision services do? Amazon had like Poly. This was before we started rebranding everything AI. We just sort of got more and more into this machine intelligence models and kept building incrementally from there.
Yeah. What I find really interesting about Classified specific is it actually targets an audience that is really professional, about their WordPress site and already knows about the stuff that they're doing, but they're making it easier for them. And that is something that, at least in my opinion, I think not all of the AI products out there are getting necessarily right as of the moment, because currently, and I think maybe James, you can agree on that, most AI products or solutions are mostly targeting that more of beginner type user, I would say. And even if you take a look at the projects Automattic and WordPress is releasing, it's mostly focused on giving you a head start and getting you easily there. So uh, a mostly unexperienced user could get somewhere with AI, with this really easy interface of having a conversation. And I think that is really something that Classified is different. Do you have, how has the feedback been with agencies? Because you, as far as I'm understanding, Classify is not necessarily built for each user, or you're not necessarily building it for the public market to target like this beginner type user I was talking about. how did you incorporate it into the workflow of an actual agency of yourself or your client? How did that feedback process go?
I'm trying to make sure I follow the question, but maybe I just quickly building on a previous point, because I think you make a good one. I think that the way I think in some cases, AI tends to target I don't even know if beginner is the right word, but people that don't have a lot of sophistication in the space, and helping them become more sophisticated about the space,
Yeah.
or they go the other extreme end of the spectrum, which is to say this maybe in an imprecise and slightly crude way, they're really targeting the nerdy super early adopters that are extremely technical, people that can go and even grok what it means to like set up an agentic flow to do like automatic updates to plugins or site changes that um and I think one of the things I'm trying to kind of say this, one of the things that it's easy with early technology, and understandable, we do some of this too with early technologies, is to confuse what's sexy with what's useful and practical in the space.
Hmm.
Like, so the earliest, like when ChatGPT exploded, and we clearly needed to pivot, classify, and deal with the horrible name it has now, that it inherited. We saw a lot. We did some early experiments. Saw a lot of other people publicly doing other interesting experiments, and it was kind of like it's interesting to see. Well, what if I could generate an entire Gutenberg page layout from a prompt? It's interesting. It's sexy. It gets attention because it's harder to kind of like to imagine how do you get from just a prompt to a full page created, but it's also, especially in those early stages, highly impractical in terms of like, yeah, use cases where somebody would actually, in a flow of trying to maybe getting back to your point of trying to create content, of trying to publish something on a magazine, where real people that are creating things in WordPress, which again, often not engineers or very technical people, um, would be ready to make that leap. So like for us, I think what we see in like enterprise being biased in that direction is in like large publishers and large media. Um, I mean, it's a couple of things. One is it's a bit of walk before we run. So before we start saying, I just trust this thing to write pages for me, like, can it just help me clean up some copy here and there? Can it give me some better, smarter SEO or title suggestions? Can it assist me and guide me and support me? Certainly knock off the plate things that are like the most routine, almost busy work kind of tasks.
Yeah.
I see virtually zero interest at this point in that space. Talk about why that is: stodgy, slow enterprise, people afraid of their jobs, human nature, whatever the reasons are. I would say virtually zero interest at this point in that part of the market. Again, enterprise, larger buyers, larger publishers. In I just want it to completely do it for me. Where people are, I think, doing something closer to that, where a writer for a publication wants to get a first draft co-created. They're not, let's be honest, they're not, and I think we're pretty far away from this. They're not doing that in the CMS.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
So where they're doing that is they're going to tools specifically dedicated to the writing process,
Yeah.
which is a whole other tangent. Like I don't actually think for like article creation, the first step in the creative process, the draft, happens in the CMS. It happens in Google Docs. It happens now in
I mean, from
ChatGPT.
my experience, it does not. I mean,
Right. It has Figma. Right. Sometimes I do think people should get earlier into the CMS, like start doing the layout, start doing the creative. But by that point, they're not looking for create the page tree. In most cases, they're looking for, to go back to your example, make sure it's things like make sure the content's accessible, and there's an audio version, and there's a searchable transcript, and there's alt text in all the places that there should be, and help me make sure the title is optimized. It's going that last mile. So I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but I guess I would say like all of our experience working with customers, it was more about assisting, supporting, providing tooling, providing assistance, providing automation around things that are just busy work in the process. And I think not we'll probably get there at some point, but I think not front and centering from a practical use case standpoint. Things that are cool, things that are like kind of mind blowing, but things that are a little impractical in terms of whether somebody's going to adopt them. Like, I just want right, do the whole thing for me and be done. Or things that are just so hard to overcome in terms of their technical complexity, in terms of like setting up agents and servers and workflows that already the barrier is high and classified to some degree, necessity you have to go in, set up an OpenAI account or an Azure account.
Jake, I also think, to build on some of what you just said, there's also the discovery part in enterprise. So with Automatic and through the products that we're building, we have WordPress VIP, which serves a very similar group to, I think, who you were just mentioning. And from what I've seen with these guys, everybody knows that AI is here. Everybody knows that it's very disruptive. But they're not really looking for this crazy all-in-one solution because they don't even know what that could be or how it would work or how it would work within their organization. What they do love are these little pieces of the puzzle of the tags, of the alt text, of the stuff that would be annoying and is annoying to have to handle manually. And that's an enterprise, but I see that in agency. I see that with individual users, the power users as well, where it's like, yeah, like I have a good process and I know what I'm doing here. And I can see how a system could eventually evolve to be really beneficial, but I need space to experiment and explore. And I think those types of lower lower complexity implementations of AI through Classify. VIP has a product called Content Helper, similar things that gives that space in enterprise to do the exploration. And then I think the individual user and the person who you mentioned before is somebody who's kind of less sophisticated related to the specific software. And I love that group because they know what they want and they're experts in what they want, but they're not experts in how to do it. That's kind of a different bucket of folks where maybe you can play around with more baked end-to-end systems, but even then, there's still the requirement to experiment as the producers of these systems and figure out like what works, what doesn't work, what works for the user and the people, and then also like how does it work within WordPress and how do we actually build and maintain and create it.
Very, very interesting. So, Jace, you probably tend to see a lot of different solutions in and out automatic in terms of AI. So, as I understand, you kind of target the different user groups specifically. Are you building different AI tools for different groups for the more enterprise experience users? Are you targeting those specifically in a different way or with different tools than, for example, um, like a month ago, WordPress and Automatic released a big statement and a big announcement where I think the internal name was Big Sky, if I'm not mistaken. Essentially, it's a WordPress AI site builder. This, at least from what I'm seeing and what I'm playing around with, targets this user group of being more beginner friendly. More like I'm just talking to an AI and getting a website out of it. Essentially, that's essentially what it's doing. But you're talking a lot of these specific tools that we see as well. Are you actually targeting those and building different tools for both of these audiences?
Yeah, so Automatic's fun because there are so many different places that it targets through multiple businesses, multiple products, and streams of thought even. So for the Big Sky internal name, which went external, but the AI website builder for WordPress.com, that is something that is very squarely aimed at the beginner to get people into WordPress and solve the blank page problem that I think everybody sees and addresses in their own ways. But you end up in WordPress without AI assistance and without a theme that has great onboarding, and the user's kind of left to their own devices to do that discovery. So the thesis there is we can probably alleviate some of that by giving them a website and putting them into this experience where they can then see how the Gutenberg site editor, post editor, GUI works with real content related to what they actually want. And that's one approach for WordPress.com, but WordPress.com, that approach works very well because that's who we target there. For WooCommerce, it's a completely different group of people. It's merchants, and those merchants may want to better understand like what's driving their sales and understand how they can configure their plugins to convert more, for example. And then for VIP, it's enterprise. So I love my position because I get to see all of it. I get to see the entire spectrum of these solutions and then also work to figure out, well, these are individual solutions and they are targeted at individual people right now, but what does it look like in 1 year, 2 years, 5 years within the Automatic ecosystem and the WordPress ecosystem in general? And how can we ideally bring these things together so there's a pretty cohesive end-to-end experience, even though it is multiple products, even though it is multiple user groups. So I think there was a question of like, what's Automatic strategy around here? Like kind of pointing at that. For us, it's this end-to-end AI experience. We want somebody to end up on one product assisted with AI through the entire experience of it. So if you look at WordPress.com, the user gets onboarded, they have the onboarding, but then the site is created and they can work through the site editor with the assistance of AI. They make it to the admin. They can use assistance within the admin as well. And that's really fun to try and design and think about from the technical perspective, but also the product perspective. And even going back to like, what are we doing in terms of these bigger kind of um, more cohesive but more opinionated approaches like the AI website builder versus maybe some of these single shot AI features or base quality of life features that solve these problems that have existed in WordPress for a while, like alt text and like the media library and like things like that. So it's fun.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much on sharing all that, Jake. I think I can imagine in a huge company like Fuel, there are a lot of specific or different users, like you talked about, publishers, enterprise companies that you're obviously working with in certain projects. Um, is there a similar thing where you see different users interacting at the end of the day with your company and what your company offers and solves? And are you targeting those in a different way, or do you see different types of experience that you need different solutions for, or are you what is your experience on that? Because I can only imagine in such a large company, such a large user group.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit, although, maybe in working my way to a more direct answer and building on a lot of what James just shared with us, I think that the part of what you're getting at is that the problem of like who is the audience for WordPress and what do they expect from AI is not a problem unique to Fuel, is not a problem unique to even Automatic, which let's be clear, serves a much wider range of use cases than Fuel does as an agency and professional services business. Um, WordPress itself has been both. How to express this has been both incredibly inspiring as a platform, but also sometimes infuriating to build as a platform because it is uniquely wide in its audience base. I don't think you can point to a maybe challenge myself on this. There are some that are emerging, but there are not many CMS website oversimplify. I know it's more than this. Website building platforms on the internet that go from someone's little blog that they pay $0 a month for on WordPress, power and WordPress.com to whitehouse.gov and huge e-commerce,
Yeah,
thousands of SKUs stores. It's really incredible in a lot of space. It's an incredible testament to open source, to the openness of the platform, to the all the things that we can get into that it could ever even reach 40% market share as a one size fits all solution. It also is a challenge for us, both those of us providing companies like Automatic and companies like Fueled coming at it from different directions, but also for the entire platform of the open source project. Because I think, if you're Sanity, if you're, even Webflow, which is kind of broad and what it does, if you're these other platforms, I think you have a pretty crisp identity of sense of who your audience is, what part of what slice of the market that you're really trying to target and do well with. And I think it provides a certain clarity for without putting words in any of their mouths, for the kind of solutions you really need to focus on building. Where I think WordPress has this challenge, has almost this continuing identity crisis would be melodramatic, but identity challenge of like, is the priority Joe first site builder who never wants to go into code and build an entire site? Is the priority the people that are building the biggest sites in the world for NASA, for other companies, and don't want to have a LLM build their entire site? They want assistance, they want automation, they want workflow. Is it for high-end developers that want to plug into an API in services to be able to customize features and do really unique things in WordPress? I'm rambling a little bit, but I think
yeah, yeah,
you're just reinforcing it in a different way, but it is a unique challenge in our industry. Fueled specifically is mostly focused on what we would call, it's an oversimplified term, but the enterprise buyer.
yeah,
Now, to be clear, there was a lot of good technology we can develop for the enterprise buyer that has huge appeal as we can make it more simple, as we can make it more approachable for a much larger audience set. We do have some solutions. We serve some smaller customers through our site watch program. We do some small, quick get in and get out engagements. We have an Elastic Press product, which is doing interesting things with AI, which is more small to medium. Has been, but let's be clear that the dominant focus we have here are larger buyers, people that are not looking for AI to just do it all and be done, people that are willing to pay, frankly, have the budget to pay for professional services. There's a couple of things there. One is their expectation across the board is, as we've discussed ad nauseam already in this conversation, how does AI bring some efficiency within their workflow in business as the customer, which is to say, uh, you know, um, it's a stupid example we keep using, but like, can I get better titles faster? Can I make sure I'm not breaking accessibility without it being a manual chore? Right. So to bring efficiency to their process, they want to know how to use these technologies to better their products. So not the efficiency play, but to do new things, interesting things. We just built a whole like improved search experience for a part of Starbucks that uses AI, right? So that's the like innovate, do more creative things, offer more option, which is exciting frontier for us. It's new territory to tread that can't just plug into vibe coding at this point. And then there's a third category, which is I think maybe the biggest challenges for a business like ours, which is frankly not the how do customers directly take advantage of it for their products and their workflows, but frankly, how does the art how we efficiently build a website and stay competitive change? Which is to say, probably the most I mean, it doesn't almost doesn't feel exaggerating to call it existential AI question for us is not what we're building in Classify. It's what does it cost and how do you build a website in 3 or 4 or 5 years, and how do you take a 300 person team and get there and get them from here to there?
Yeah.
It's building, engineering, tooling, designing our processes that are the most disruptive.
Yeah, that's actually a great topic and great introduction onto. We're talking about a lot of solutions that are targeting customers of WordPress or of your companies, for example. But what about internal things? So as far as I understand, everybody of you uses AI on a day-to-day basis. I would guess at least. What are you doing, Jake, internally to get things like more make them more efficient at the end of the day to deliver such project? Are there tools that are using? Are there workflows that you're developing for those teams, or is there how do you approach that?
Yeah, it's multi-pronged, and frankly, I just got back from a 2.5 week vacation, so I feel like I might be out of date again, back in with the team, 3 weeks later. But I think there's a few prongs to it. So one is absolutely building tools, building processes, building workflows for things that are repeating, challenging, problems. A good example of this would be, we just published about this right before I went on break. I was almost well, I still feel like a little bit embarrassed to say, we vibe coded a great tool that we never got around to before because it felt like it was arduous and tedious to build, which is you can read about it on fuel.com on our blog, which is automating going from Figma styles and tokens to a WordPress theme JSON. Right? Well,
Mhm.
so that's an example of how we're. It's like it hits so many check boxes because it's in a like not circular, but like in a perfect example. It was both an example of like with the right culture, with the right push for our team, with the right go do this, the reward, the recognition, the encouragement to go build these kind of tools. It's an example of how we could build things that help build things faster and more effectively in some cases. And it is an example of where we now have a tool because we're able to do so that lets us streamline our processes,
Yeah.
do things more quickly. That's part of it. Part of it is choosing, like trying to rally around what collectively with 150 plus engineers, what are the platforms that we think make the most sense? So if we sort of start, roll back the clock 9 months, there's a bit of a let a thousand flowers bloom, go try whatever AI platforms you want, be careful about PII going in and things that are truly confidential, but otherwise just try different platforms. Now I think we're going back a couple of months. We're really at the use one of these, right? Maybe a little bit more room, but these two we're pretty sure based on our experiments. Use these tools. Here's some examples of prompts. So it's education, narrowing the tool set, building new tools to help the team work more efficiently. And I think the way that I look at it, the last prong is, and I alluded to this, is cultural and systems and incentives within the business to get people excited about it. And some of that is easier. I'm I'm curious. I imagine probably similar things in both of your businesses. Some of that is creating a culture of celebration and recognition of and reward for those that embrace it. Even to say it bluntly, maybe a little bit of like friendly inter-engineer competition that you kind of want to build within the company to show that you're getting ahead on these platforms. So as cheesy as this example might sound, like we have a channel
Yeah.
company where, what we ask is, hey, if you save a little bit of time on a project, first of all, go enjoy that afternoon. And second of all we're asking is go in there, tell us what you did, point to the repo if it's something that anybody at the company can look at. And our leadership will rally around that, celebrate that. And it really starts to create not only a culture of like, this is we're not afraid of this. We're recognizing this. We're rewarding this. We're good to take risks, good to try some new things within the business. But it also, again, it creates a little bit of like it creates an atmosphere and a culture of like, well, maybe I need to be right on top of this as well. The other thing is we need to have systems that like, and we get very, I don't know, psychological and like economic about it. It's the way I think about these issues. I think there can easily be a pattern that inside of a company, like if you're not a little boutique where everybody has a share of the businesses, when you're more scaled business, which uh, um, is sort of a like what to put it bluntly, what's in it for the individual engineers to embrace this? There's a sense of like, great, if I really embrace this, who am I? Cold way of saying it. Who am I enriching? In doing so, me? Is it am I getting better in this process, or is it just my management?
Yeah,
Is
there's some fear involved as well. Like,
And am I gonna be rewarded by saying, "Great, you were able to do that thing in half the time, now here's all the work," right, to get done in that process. So I think there's a challenge in business, especially of scale. I mean, this speaks to the larger culture of the universe at the moment of, like, getting a large team on board to unlock its efficiency and creativity rather than afraid to do so, rather than feeling like in a sense, like in the no good deed goes unpunished kind of way that they'd be punished. Right, for being able to do so. So I think there's a bunch of, like, systems and incentives you create that range from Jake's gonna go write a story and help me talk about all the work that I did publicly on LinkedIn and on the blog and everything to, like, literally just things like, "Hey, if we got this budget for it, we got this time allocation for the project, if you can do it faster, fine by us. We're not gonna just throw more work on your plate. We're gonna
yeah,
get some of that time back." So again, I feel like I'm droning on, but I think I can't underscore enough for scale businesses, like the cultural, business, economic incentives, as being key to helping make that change. I have no doubt that, like, most of our engineers, certainly our best ones, are capable of making this transition, are capable of
yeah.
thinking about embracing this technology. Not the skill set that's the problem. It's the incentive structure. It's
Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah, leaning into that transition and really embracing it. I would say is a key factor. Actually, shout out to the theme JSON converter. I really tried it out and I really liked it. The theme JSON converter is probably wrong wording, but I saw the post and I tried the tool and I really liked it. And then that's actually similar to a couple of the trends we're seeing as well with our clients or agencies as well. They're quietly building internal AI tools that specifically do a thing that they usually did manually, and now AI is kind of automating that instead of, and that's maybe a shift that I'm seeing, or we are at least experiencing, instead of buying little SaaS tools to help you, if they're just quietly building something that it specifically does that for them, which is then really individual, but really embraces their workflow, which obviously works great for them and their the tooling. Um, what I find curious in getting back to you, James, is all these internal toolings, and I think both of you can agree on in general. There are a lot of little tools that people write and a lot of different workflows they're creating based on an AI now, and they're mostly maybe an island, and they're having their own workflows. How do you get all these little workflows, little prompts, little solutions people build into kind of like a general, as you were speaking about this vision of AI in WordPress, getting one streamlined, one AI in there. How do you tackle this in these different projects and like companies, I could say, with different solutions for different audience and get that into one core idea? I think that I find that as a, like, how do you do that? That's fascinating.
It is. It's very interesting, and I'll answer it from an internal perspective first, and then focusing on kind of what we would like to present to customers in 1, 2, 3 years from Automattic. So first with internal, like Jake mentioned, there are so many opportunities, and in terms of the overarching business, if a company is able to adopt AI effectively, we're in a really good spot. So this is something that when I came into Automatic, I saw a lot of opportunity for this type of internal tooling and enablement of the organization and celebrating the usage of AI as opposed to trying and like move away from it and stay away from it. Just because that's where everything's going. And the three major things that Jake mentioned, the tools, the culture, and like celebrating enablement are things that we're also doing at Automatic. But I would also assume that many organizations in a large scale or even agencies are doing really similar things where it's like, how do we use AI? How do we make sure that we're the companies adopting this stuff so we're not the ones left behind when the other companies go and adopt this stuff? Two additional things, just internal, that we've done as well is create guidelines so people can trust that they are able to do something and able to explore and create these little one-off prompts and solutions and look at a tool and say, yeah, I can use this. And here's the guideline that kind of explains, oh, like we're not going to use personal information. And maybe for this client,
Mhm.
everything is excluded, all of that. Um, and from that, they can trust that they can go and build and experiment and explore. Then if they create really interesting tooling and this happens kind of throughout Automatic as the organization, it can be surfaced and it can be more visible and can be showcased. And if that makes sense to go and bring to the wider organization, Automatic specifically has an internal AI team to go and do that. But again, like if you're able to surface this, then especially in technical organizations, you don't even need the team. You can just go and kind of get people to continually adopt and enhance these solutions, especially if you have those guidelines and the trust that people
Yeah.
need for that.
So you're
Uh,
giving them guidelines, and then you giving them the platform to present it internally into your company, and then you creating
yes,
something out of it, or you deciding whether you want to create something.
yes, and the final bit of things, and this isn't as baked as I would like it to be, and it's going to be more baked over time, is we're biasing as Automatic the company towards a similar approach to what we're doing in WordPress core with the core AI work. Me as the core AI lead, or one of the leads. In Automatic, we are creating building blocks for our developers and even our non-developers who now have access to ChatGPT and can vibe code a bunch of different things. We're giving them building blocks to go and build these solutions and kind of the roadmap of, okay, this is an internal framework. This allows you to go and do agentic looping. This allows you to go and register tools. You can go and expose it into WordPress in this way. You can go and pull information in this unified way. So now we have people who not only are celebrated because they build these tools, not only do they understand what they can build and what data they can use and a way to review the solutions that they want to and have created, but they also now are having a increasingly baked and growing toolkit and toolbox to go and build these things with. And I've found that anywhere. And you don't need to be building your own toolkits because these things do exist, and there are many open source libraries. And in some organizations, it makes sense to do it yourself, and others, in the majority of others, I'd say it makes sense to go and point at something. Um, I think that's kind of like the perfect storm to enable companies to move more agilely. I don't know if that's move in a more agile way. And again, like keep up with the other companies that are doing the exact same thing. Um,
Mm.
so that's the internal bit. I can transition to external, but I saw Jake, you shook your head on something and I wanted to see if there was anything you wanted to. Okay.
No, I'm 100% with you. I was gonna comment on its applications to external. You're on a roll.
Okay. I'll mention, I think there's an interesting segue and overlap with um, that internal stuff within Automatic kind of flowing into our products within Automatic. So,
Mhm.
like I mentioned before, there's kind of this overarching vision of like, we would like everything to work together. We would like this to be an end-to-end experience. It may be multiple products, it may be multiple surfaces, but it can feel the same if all installed on the same environment. That's something that is a very big vision, and it's something that takes a lot of work to get to. It's also interesting because given how wide of a demographic Automatic serves with all of the products, I think if we were to build this unified thing outside of AI, that might not be a good vision because of the individual demographics of like, this is enterprise, this is not enterprise. With AI, it can kind of scale up and down in not the most completely adaptive way, but it can scale up and down to say, I'm going to service this user who is a beginner who doesn't know how to code. And I'm going to service this user who is a developer who does know how to code. And you can kind of build systems that can be deployed into different contexts and tweaked a little bit to go and be more effective for the demographic that they serve, sharing the same underlying stuff. So with this general vision of AI, I think it is possible to go and create a system that adapts to the users and spans across multiple products in a cohesive way. And the way we want to build that within Automatic is have these multiple product groups, target these individual demographics, build it all using the same fundamental building blocks and pieces, some of it being within Automatic, some of it being hopefully what comes to WordPress core, doing so in a unified way. and eventually result in this really, really impressive end-to-end system. So again, it's like have the building blocks. We do have multiple teams focusing on multiple products, building in the same way, and that allows us to kind of think in this overarching direction as opposed to, oh, this is one product for this one group, and we're going to build it in this way, and it's not reusable anywhere else.
Mm.
And that flows into core AI, which I can get into now, but I can also yield back to you, Jacob, to see see where you want to go with it.
Yeah, no, that's very, very interesting. I could go on for hours, or I would go on listening to you for hours, to be honest. But I want to shape things up a little bit right now, and I want to jump into a section I just quickly called. It came up with hot or not, which I'm gonna share like a trend or like a buzzword, and I want you to say if you think that's hot or not, and whatever hot or not means for you. So essentially, if it's here to stay, if you think that's good, if you think that's bad, that's totally up to you. So just simply say hot or not, and then just give maybe a quick reason why you're thinking that way. Um, yeah, and I'm just gonna go for it, and I'm gonna target one of you specifically, and then if the other one wants to share a thought on it, feel free to, but you don't necessarily have to. So James, first off, we talked about it, vibe coding, hot or not?
Very hot. I think it's awesome if you do it in the right way, in the right context. So I see a lot of folks who are developers and really good and tenured and have been doing this for a long time, using this new way of creating to experiment and explore and create MVPs. And that is very interesting from a personal perspective in terms of being expressive and creating things that you couldn't really have the time to ever do in the past. And it's also very interesting from like an exploration perspective from an organization. We see product managers creating not in Figma anymore, but in code. So I think it's very hot, but you have to do it right. You can't be just willy-nilly using this device to go and build things that end up on hundreds of millions of sites. So you need to be smart.
Yeah, Jake, I see you nod your head, so I probably
Yeah, I agree.
very good. Okay, Jake, one thing for you: AI written articles,
Hot.
hot. Why?
I mean, I think the answer is not very different. I mean, it's vibe coding for writing, right? It's effectively the same answer, which is people that know how to write, people that know the story they want to tell, is a tool to skip some of like fast forward, accelerate some of like the mechanics of the syntax and the prose shaping to be able to more efficiently express their ideas, maybe even express their ideas better. And I think is only good. I would say like in this focus on content that I've had, I'm able to do this in about, I'm working about 24 or 30 hours a week on average now with one person helping me. We're able to do that. Now, we don't, to be clear, like just shove it in with a short prompt and publish it on the web, you're going to get garbage or slop. I guess is the term of the year. Um, but as a tool to like rapidly accelerate, help more effectively communicate, shoot the LLM to let the voice more naturally without such manual effort feel consistent. It's fantastic. We're not. It's not the storyteller. It's not the person that knows what the story is, what the idea is. It's not the final cut, but as an accelerant, yeah, for sure. Hot.
All right, thank you very much, James. AI generated logos.
Not, not. I actually, so this is a very personal opinion, but I don't really like AI generated art that much. And I find that the simpler you try to make these generations, specifically around logos, they all have the same look and feel. And I really like a logo being an expression of a business, and I don't think AI gets you there, specifically on logos. That's a funny question because we didn't coordinate this, and I was just having a very detailed discussion with some of the designers in Automattic in the New York office about this. And yeah, I love the human thought and creativity and process that goes into logo design specifically, but art in general. And that's not like anti all AI art, but with logos, it's anti AI generated logos. And that's a personal, again, a personal opinion.
Yep, that's what I'm asking for. Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Jake. AI generated client proposals. Have you done? What do you think about it?
If I had, I mean, if I in my binary choice, can't do like lukewarm. In my binary choice here, I might have to say hot. Again, I feel like I'm probably gonna keep giving the same answer. Like trying to say like AI autonomously responding to them right now or getting no. Again, for all of these things as a tool to help accelerate the craft, to help shortcut things that are just, if we're being honest with ourselves, are just grunt labor tasks and not actually creative tasks. Yeah, I mean, I think I know it's happening across some agencies as an assistive tool. I think every agency that's not doing yet is thinking about, how can I take some of the repetitive tasks out of this process? I know I did this thing or some permutation of this thing over and over and over again for the last 10 proposals. How do I not spend my day doing what, I don't mean this to sound dismissive, but to make an the rhetorical point, like the blue collar work of just typing it again
Mhm.
right to the screen. Yeah.
But would you go ahead and brief a project and just say, "Give me an offer, give me a proposal for it"?
As a V 0.5, right? To say, like, pull in the right case studies, write, the section on how we do QA. I don't need to write that for the 700th time. As a
Yeah,
permutation that we edit, clean up, augment, bring creativity in. Yeah.
yeah.
But no, I mean, I don't think, to be honest with you, I don't think any of these AI things, with maybe the exception of something like stock art or something like that, are ready to be, you know, uh, press a button and you're done.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, perfect, perfect, overlap to the next one. James, I'm giving you AI memes.
AI memes. I do like AI memes, and I like AI memes especially when you can tell that there was like a lot of intention that went into creating this thing, and it's like you can kind of extract the humor coming from the person that has created this thing, and I think that's I've seen a couple that are just absolutely hilarious, and it's
Yeah.
like either a remix of one of these classic memes, and you can kind of like get the wit that somebody's infused into it. I think it's very funny.
Interesting. You just said you don't like AI art, but AI memes, it's different.
Well, I think my common thread is that and Jake's kind of enunciated this in some of his answers. It's like when you can use AI to kind of express yourself or be more effective and quicker, but you still have the human element and the human connection. So it goes back to the art, it goes back to the memes. Like I don't like memes that are just like a remake, a mash of a bunch of random things that aren't
Mhm.
funny. But,
Yeah.
like, when you can tell that somebody's put thought into this thing, there's also, like, funny video generations now, and it's just like, "Oh, like, somebody wrote that script, and this AI character has said it, but he's like, say it in this way." It's hilarious. It's very funny, and it's something that you would never unlock without AI.
I think the way that I think about that, I don't know if you shut me up if I'm breaking your heart or not.
No worries, no worries. That's the intention of this.
The way that I think about it is like, see if this is a good way to express it. Like, I always love that metaphor of like I know I'm like cliche tech nerd, the Steve Jobs quote, but the Steve Jobs quote of the computer is the bicycle for the mind. And I have sort of taken to my own head. I don't know if I said this very publicly very often, that I think of AI as like the motorcycle for the mind from there, where it's what I think, what is powerful about AI, where it is most, at least today, transformative, is not replacing human creativity. It's the places where it can accelerate human activity because it takes the manual work. You have an idea, to the meme thing, you have a really creative idea or meme in your head. You may not have the tools, or it would take you 4 hours to actually go open up Photoshop, right, and craft it. But if it helps you, help it accelerate how fast you can express that idea, right? So if the computer and Photoshop, cut the time in, I'm making up numbers here, but cut the time down by 70%, we're gonna bring out your stencil set and, right, tracing things and everything about with an eraser. And if AI can take that down even further, I think when we think about something like a logo, and I really share all of James's perspective, and maybe some designers would slap me around for this. I think the reason that that feels like it falls into the not camp is because, like, for a good creative designer, getting from idea to the expression of the idea doesn't feel like a Herculean task when you're talking about a logo, in the same way that, like, you know, how to say it, like crafting all the panels of a meme,
Mhm.
right, has obnoxiously tedious compared to what you're trying to express.
I think also, Jake, my thing with the logo is that a lot of the work around logo design specifically is, and this is also with web design and actually a lot of creation, it's not the actual act of creating these things. It's really interfacing with the client and figuring out who they are and what they want and how they want it and going back and forth and infusing real artistic direction and
Yeah.
talent into this. So that's a funny question, Jake, because the logo stuff is stuff I've deeply thought about, which is just an interesting thing.
Yeah, I think that one we're also brushing up against. Like, it's still, I mean, if we're being, it's incredibly impressive, but I also think if we're comparing like image generation and video generation to where like, frankly, even code or text generation is right now, it's not quite there in the same way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It, it still feels very, I think of those like, everybody's seen if the photograph becomes a Picasso, right? When you run it through it, there's something about the way LLMs and these language models work that just doesn't quite feel as mature, but you can sort of see a version of, logo creation where, again, I think where we would agree is like, here is my company name, make a logo. That's not that's robbing us of human creativity and exploration.
Yes.
There's some, I will say, if you saw me like sort of smirking, there was some joke in here that humans have also managed to make every logo look the same, without AI.
Yes. Well, I also bucket the Fiverr logos versus the major ad agency logos and things like that.
Sure, I'm being a little,
Yes. Yes.
but but like could I see a process where if like these AIs got a little bit better about like really being able to refine and engage with visual images in the same way that they can with copy and code right now, where you could say, here's what I've learned about the company. Here are 5 inspirational logos. Here's kind of the direction I'm thinking of. And I'm not a designer, but it's colorful or it's bubbly, or here are ideas that I feed into it. And be able to bring back to you 10 different things to react to and keep shaping. Again, AI assisting the creative process, not replacing the creative process as a person, I'd still be excited about that. I would be surprised. I bet a lot of like very good designers are, whether they're telling us or not, are probably are maybe even starting today that process of how do I get to a logo with some interactivity back and forth,
Yeah.
collaboration
Yeah.
tools for acceleration. So I think the point, I mean, I'm rambling, but the point that I'm trying to make is accelerant of human creativity as opposed to replacement for human creativity is, I think, the way that
Me too.
at least today, the way that I process it.
Yeah. You guys made the perfect transition from this hot or not to the next topic, because that is, I think you're tackling one of the most important topics, because there's a big fears out there that AI might make certain services, certain agency services or agencies entirely obsolete at some point. But I don't think that's necessarily true, or I think the answer is more nuanced. As you said it already, I like the metaphor of having this as a motorcycle of the brain. Um, so obviously, there's one of the most quoted quotes out there is AI won't replace humans, but humans with AI will replace humans without AI. And I think that tends to be exactly at what you're getting to. There's if we're existing, if we're making things more efficient, if we're shortcutting things, that is actually something that is really good. But if we're trying to replace creativity or replace understanding the client, understanding the goals, I think that then is not really feasible. Or is that the point of what we're trying to do? Is that how you see it as well in terms of will AI replace agencies or agency services? Is that how you see it?
That's a tough question. I mean, in the short term, if I don't short term, yes, that's how I see it. I think that's where we are today. I think that's a reality in terms of what these LLMs actually do. I think that I don't know. Yeah. I think what's I'm sorry, I'm rambling. I think what's hard for this is like it's like I'm trying to parse ideology from practical application. Like ideologically, it's very difficult for me to say I can be excited about a future where AI replaces humans. I don't know if that because it feels like we're basically just in some very
Do you
this way.
think that AI will replace humans in some parts? Or
Yeah, I think so. Right now, I don't think so. Two ways to answer that question. Personally, ideologically, I hope we don't get to a place where, for the most creative pursuits and endeavors, AI replaces the human spark of creativity as opposed to rapidly accelerating it, helping us bring creativity to life much faster. That's ideological as a statement. Practically as a statement, I actually, fortunately, perhaps, I don't think AIs today do that effectively to the logo point. I don't really think I may be being a little too simplistic, but I don't think if you're looking for something truly original or creative, that they really do that. Yet, to the extent that you want to like really roll something out for your business or have a fire product, right, or something like that, could probably debate that. What's harder is when you look out 3, 4, 5 years, right, in this ecosystem. If you asked me, like, for not for everyone, for 70% of people that need to throw up a marketing site or a creative looking story about their restaurant with a menu, whether AIs can do that end to end. I mean, yeah, they probably can. Um, and I feel like I'm rambling here because I'm thinking about your question.
Yeah, but ideology, we could then go on in the discussion of what actual true creation is and what makes things truly creative. Is it
Right.
the result of all the things you've experienced during your life, or is it something truly unique?
Most art is derivative. Most art, yeah.
Yeah, because that is what I'm thinking is really interesting. If you would have asked most people in the streets a couple of years ago, or actually maybe even today, what are the jobs that AI is going to replace or like differentiate, what like shape the fastest and the easiest, you're gonna say, okay, these low skill jobs. But the reality actually is that the jobs like developing jobs and creative jobs are tackled a lot with by the services of AI. Because, for example, as you said already, code generation is kind of already there in a lot of places and already usable, while image generation and really, like, for example, tasks that needs to you need to have a thumb to do that task. AI cannot really do
Well,
it.
the problem, and again, you can go really deep on this and go around in circles. The problem for most agencies, certainly agencies that look like a Fuel 10, 10 up kind of agency, is that how to say this, like creativity and your innovation, your creativity, your business problem solving is the 10% of the work you do that differentiates you to sell the rest of it.
Mhm.
Which is to say, like, most of the work that agencies in our service, it's not that it's low skill, whatever the hell that means anymore, low skill labor, it's that it's manual labor
Mhm.
that you're doing that's being replaced. 90%, and don't take 90% too literally, but to make like 90% of the work that we actually do and bill hours, right, for, have our time compensated for is production. It's moving the pixels on the page if you're a designer, it's typing the code into the
Yeah,
right, like editor and deploying it. Um,
yeah,
so I think there's no quest. I think there's no question at this point that that model is already being radically disrupted and will be more radically disrupted. I think there's a I'm going slipping all over the rails here. There's a question for agencies like ours of, okay, that 10% that is unique and not just go do the thing, go build it, go code it, go move the pixels, go move the code, the creativity, the what's the strategy, the how do you even approach this problem. Um, do we just do more of that and fill up the same budgets with that? Does that just cost more? Like,
yeah.
again, the business model side of it, but does a buyer say, again, I'm picking a random number, buyer that wants to spend $100,000 on a website, is the future in 5 years, that I now only am gonna spend $5,000 on my website or
Or
$1,000.
do it, or am I getting more value for 100,000, or
Right?
am I getting more value out of it?
Right, or do they say, "No,
Yeah,
that's still what it costs, but this is gonna be 20x
yeah,
in terms of, like, features I could have, creative application, art that will create the website, the better logo," right? To torture that example, wherever they've gotten before. I think that's the harder question that I'm not I could argue both a half glass full and a half glass empty. And it's probably somewhere in between. It's probably not gonna go down to I'll spend
mm,
$20 on ChatGPT to build a website, but it's also probably not gonna cost what it did, uh, 5 months ago.
yeah. To make this a bit more concrete, what, like, James, maybe you can refer on that from your past days, but even from your present days. What are there parts of agency work that, or what parts of agency work are, in your view, most likely to be automated, and what parts are most likely not to be automated as of right now, but maybe also in the future?
Yeah. Well, I think something I was thinking about as you and Jake were talking was if I took my agency Isotropic from 2018 and dropped it even into today, but definitely like 2 years down the road, it would not succeed. It wouldn't work. And it was a very successful agency. And I think that's a good example to kind of underscore if you as an agency or a professional in this industry don't understand that there is disruption that comes from AI and don't best position yourself to make sure that you're on the right side of it, then there is definite risk that there will be negative impacts to your business and the way you do things in the process. And I don't think you can really sugarcoat it, and you have to be realistic about that. So if I dropped my agency into today's day and age, I think the thing that would be most impacted would be the actual process of running this company. And there's a lot of efficiencies to unlock from AI in terms of maybe, for example, drafting the client proposals. If we're spending, I don't know, 5 hours on this when we could be spending 1 hour on this and then using the rest of the four to go and prospect and sell, that's not good. And other agencies now are doing that, and we're not going to be able to compete. A big thesis of mine when I founded WPAI, which the first product was called Code WP, and it made code, was, hey, when I ran this agency, we built large D2C WooCommerce sites. We built a lot of them. While they might have served different industries, I always found us developing 80% similar plugins to glue together a lot of WooCommerce extensions and functionality and features. So the thesis there with CodeWP, and it seemed to be right from the usage that we had, was, hey, like this repetitive coding work, this almost busy coding work is something that I can disrupt with AI, and I personally would want this to be disrupted. So then I can go and focus on the architectural design of these WooCommerce stores, make the better decisions there, maybe build out more impressive solutions that are more boutique for that client, if that made sense. So that's what that's what got me back into WordPress and AI, and that's what the thesis of WPAI was. Let's go and solve some of these low-lived things that will be disrupted if I do it, or if somebody else does it, it will be disrupted. Let's do something specific for the WordPress community where I know there's probably not going to be many other startups doing it in WordPress, and create a tool that is better than generalist things like ChatGPT. So that was the idea there, and the usage and the adoption and the growth, the exponential curve of growth that we had definitely proved that that was at least somewhat right, and that many agencies were definitely automating away some of this coding busy work. And eventually we started working on an agent where it was like, this is not going to go and run your entire WordPress site, but it's going to help with the automatic plugin updates, for example, or like basic scheduled maintenance tasks. So all of that to say, the product's got a lot of use. This is what is most disrupted right now. If you zoom out and think about the future as an agency owner or anybody in this industry, you need to be realistic that things will change, and you just need to kind of go at it with an open mind and also a glass half full mentality of things will change. How can I adopt these tools and systems and ideas to be the most effective version of myself? And then finally, I'll close on how do I also contribute to the future that I want. So I would assume that we all want human creativity's value to go up as the price to create code goes down. How do we go and make that thing happen? This is something that I also think about with WordPress itself through the core AI position. I want WordPress to exist in 10 years. And how do we make it exist in 10 years? We create the systems that other developers need to build the experiences that people expect in the coming century, um,
Yeah.
and enable people to do that and steer in the right way. So like not pretend this isn't happening, not take action and just be like it's going to be fine. Uh, Understand that there is disruption and then steer towards that disruption, embrace it, and try to create what we want for the future.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very valuable lesson or like a takeaway. Jake, do you wanna add anything there as we're kind of at the end of this episode? Is there a takeaway or a tip for agencies like going into the future that they should be embracing a certain thing that you might recommend them for like recommend to them?
No, and I think on the agency specific point, I think we touched on that earlier. It's don't just focus on the technologies, focus on building the culture, focus on making sure that your engineers are unlocked. I feel like they can get ahead of that. We have a unique and precious moment for who knows how long, a year, maybe 2 years, where it's not so dramatically changed that your business model is broken overnight. So you have a moment to start changing the way you work and adapt and adjust, but you have to move swiftly. You have to move purposefully, and again, focus on culture, focus on providing tools and resources, focus on efficiency, focus on coaching, creativity. And disabuse yourself of any notion that your value is going to be the just mechanical work. of the job as an agency in a few years. There's one point that I think about I think where core is going and where WordPress is going as a platform, maybe building on the last point here that James made, which is two things in terms of rallying around WordPress core in terms of where it goes. I think it speaks to, in my opinion, what are the two facets of WordPress that unlocked its growth over its entire trajectory. Those are two things. One is for the baseline, what 60 to 70% of all people who use CMS software need to do. Let's rally around shared built-in functionality rather than having 1,000 people trying to solve the same problem. So very baseline stuff, probably many things that are in ClassifAI or other solutions today becoming just basic hygiene for a product that's about easily creating and publishing content, all text, smarter proofreading, proofing, collaboration on a document, image generation, those kind of tools. And then I think James hinted at this, or maybe said this in a way that I know what he's saying, but maybe we can make even more direct, which is if the first thing WordPress does is be very good for the baseline things for just easily creating content. The second thing that I think unlocked WordPress's growth was being a very flexible, agile, open development enabled platform that let thousands, if not tens of thousands of developers create integrations, build a stack on top of it to solve all kinds of different problems. So creating the like tooling infrastructure inside the platform to be able to build out new AI features, be able to plug more advanced functionality into the system. This is a very crude analogy, but I kind of think of it as like you could some ways look at like the introduction of custom post types into WordPress. It's not that what WordPress needed to do is on its own create immediately a shopping cart, a product like shopping content type or a calendar event. What it needed to do was create a framework that would let developers wanting to create all kinds of content be able to very easily plug in without having to like really, frameworks, APIs, without having to torture the software. We need the equivalent of that for AI in WordPress, a framework to make it very easy for developers to open up all the different niche, last 20%, last 10%, last 1% market kind of use cases. And so I think your earlier question rallying around what's happening core, table stakes hygiene for publishing and creating content a standard way versus everybody having to go out and figure out how to add tires to their car in a few years. And second of all, the development frameworks, the tooling, the under the hood stuff that will let a rich ecosystem of developers safely, efficiently build out on top of WordPress for tons of other applications that we can't even imagine. Certainly not just the core team is going to imagine.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you very, very much. I could honestly go on for hours and hours listening to you and getting your opinion on certain things. I have hundreds of questions that I didn't even ask here. But to close this out, that was a blast. Like, thank you very, very much. I really, really appreciated you taking the time and sharing your thoughts and your experiences on AI on that very much evolving topic and reality, but future as well. Yeah, thank you very much for being here. I just quickly want to mention to the audience that you can find us on YouTube, on our website, and check it out. Next episodes are coming in probably a couple of weeks. So stick around and check those next episodes out. And yeah, and Jake and James, Jacob, we are closing this. Thank you very, very much for taking the time. It was a pleasure, and hope you have a great day, have a great week, and I hope to see you around. Thanks. Bye.